everyone. I'm really excited to be here with Steve, and we're really excited to talk about equity in law school admissions and just how we can work to make the process more fair. I know that Steve has a lot of knowledge about the testing side of it, and, but it really does go beyond just testing. I think that's, kind of where the conversation gets stuck sometimes, but I took some time to look at the numbers and just really take a holistic approach at looking at what the US does, what other countries do, specifically Canada, and some other similarly situated countries. And I think that there's a lot that can be improved in the US, legal education, lawyer pipeline in terms of equity and access.
Yeah, there certainly can be. That's really interesting that you looked outside the US. I haven't done that too much, although I'm vaguely familiar. It's kind of funny, actually, because no other country emphasizes standardized testing like the US does.
US loves tests.
Yes, we do love tests, the SAT, the ACT. The other countries are like, what are you guys doing? But here we are focused on the numbers. And so that's the world I live in. And of course, there are a lot of problems associated with that. I wish they didn't get the emphasis they do. But here we are, and we can look to change the emphasis, but we can also look to change all the policies around it that make it even more difficult than it has to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, when you look at the numbers, I like numbers. In 2019, it said only 5% of lawyers were of color, which is crazy when you really think about the percentage that they are in the United States. Something like 36% are women, which is, it's on an upward trend. But the fact that there's only 5%, actually not even of color, 5% of lawyers are Black, right? That's just a terrible number. That's a terrible statistic. And then when you also looked at the 2017 application data, only 51% of Black applicants were selected to a law school. 49% of Black applicants who applied in the 2016-2017 application cycle did not get into a single law school, which is just a staggering percentage.
Yeah, it is. There are no words for that, really. Clearly there's a problem.
Right. And I mean, so of course, if you only are admitting half of the applicants, you're only going to get a certain percentage of students getting into school. And so it made me really think about what is it really? Because schools can always have the option to look beyond numbers if they choose to look at some of those soft features, to look at the essays, the letters of recommendation. But I think a lot of it boils down, even maybe before college, I think a lot of it boils down to, well, who are they surrounding themselves with? Do they know lawyers? Does it seem like an accessible path? Are there people even encouraging Black, high schoolers, Black middle schoolers to go into, and Latinx, and Latinx students and other, indigenous peoples, but are they encouraging them to go into the field of law? Or is the field of law seen as this kind of entity that is predominantly white? And it is. 85% of lawyers in this country are white, and for the wealthy.
I could see LSAC doing much more with regard to pipelines, where LSAC facilitates that sort of earlier mentoring in high school and in college. And they actually have incentive to do so, because LSAC really exists to serve law schools more than it does to serve law school applicants, which is unfortunate for a lot of reasons. But there are certain cases where those incentives line up. If LSAC could source more applicants in general, but in particular source them from underserved communities and support them by providing them with high quality test preparation, by providing them with the counseling and the mentoring and the resources to set themselves up for success in the application process, that would benefit everybody. Yeah,
I think the mentoring piece is so huge. And, I think it really starts though with LSAC admitting that there is a problem. When I went on their website, it said that, the LSAT is supposed to be more fair and more equitable because it's skills-based and not knowledge-based. So in their opinion, because, it doesn't take into account maybe you had a really great college or high school preparation, they're trying to take away some of this intrinsic knowledge that you may not have had if you were an underrepresented minority. They think that makes it more fair. But I don't know what you think, but I think if it's a skills-based test, that means that you've got to do some test prep, and that intrinsically gets to the heart of wealth and access.
Well, there's a big conflict of interest from an organization like LSAC, because on the one hand, they're the ones creating the test. If you're the one creating the test, you don't have incentive to help people improve on the test. They might pay some general lip service to it. Obviously, they have partnered with Khan Academy, which is a very basic, bare bones sort of prep option. It's not nearly enough. Nobody could prep with that alone. And they're not going to give you the keys to the castle. They're not going to give you the keys to the kingdom. That would run counter to their entire purpose, which is to separate people along that score range of 120 to 180, every single point in between. So they're simply not going to be the ones to do it. And if you look at everything, even they've put out themselves, like the very basic explanations in Super Prep, or even just the FAQ at the beginning covering the 3 sections with a general overview, it's not nearly enough. And here's the problem. They're providing barely anything on the prep end, which I wouldn't expect them to do really. Right. Then on the other end, they're shutting down people who are trying to put out free explanations. Just the other day, they removed the explanations from one of my friends on YouTube. They just knocked them out entirely. And it's a major problem. If you're not providing them, why shut down others who are putting them out, not even making any money off them? They're just YouTube videos. It's completely unacceptable. And I mean, I'm not a copyright attorney, but there are some big questions there.
No, and I'm an attorney, but I'm not a copyright attorney. So I know that there are questions there that I can't answer. But I mean, the average score, I think, for Black students is about 142 compared to about 153 for white and Asian applicants, which is still a fairly modest score in the grand scheme of things. I think that there needs to be more done there. I think that there needs to be, just more investigation of why is that and why is it so low? And where can you even go, honestly, with a 142? I mean, you can go tons of places with a 142, but it does really limit your options.
Yeah, I'm not sure that a 142 is getting you into any law school worth attending.
Right. And so, when you look at the average SAT score in this country, and I think it's somewhere around 1080, don't quote me, that score will actually still get you into more than half of the colleges in this country. I mean, we've got over 4,000 schools, and over 75% of them admit more than 75% of the applicants. I tell students that all the time. We focus on this top 200 or so schools, but there are tons of really great institutions on the undergrad level that will accept students with that average SAT score, even significantly below. But that's a problem then when you look at the law school side and you look at the average LSAT score, and you're like, oh, well, this actually is not going to get me into more than half of the law schools out there. I mean, that's a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem. And I think part of that is that the law school admissions is much more numbers driven than undergrad admissions is, primarily LSAT, GPA, and then there's everything else. And they'll say it's holistic, but I just don't believe them. They're so focused on the rankings, and we've seen bad actors on the admissions side play games to boost the perception in the rankings, to even fabricate employment numbers entirely. There have been a few cases of that over the years. So I see a lot of it as coming from that rankings focus. And I guess my question is, how do we stop focusing on the rankings? It's like kind of this thing where people look at the rankings because everybody else looks at the rankings too. So if we could all just agree, put the rankings aside, nobody's ever looking at US News for anything else anyway. So why do we trust Bob Morse to tell us what to think?
Right. No, I think it really starts with the ABA, because we've seen this huge test optional movement come through the college side, and it has to because of COVID. But because of ABA accreditation, we haven't seen that kind of similar trend happen on the law school side. And I do think to some degree, the rankings do play in and contribute to, probably some sort of, I don't want to say corporate mindset, but a little bit, it's gatekeeping. And I think they do like gatekeeping to an extent. And I think if it started from the top, if the ABA said, okay, we don't want to be a gatekeeping institution, we want to increase diversity, we want to increase the type of lawyers, because representation is so important. You need to have lawyers that look like your clients. And I think if that was more of a focus on the ABA side, then they would start looking at things like, do we need to require tests? Can law schools go test optional? What are the rankings and what are we using? I know that they don't control the rankings, but they do have a lot of power in the narrative.
They do. And the rankings, they weight things in a very strange, secretive way. And there are things like the size, money spent per student, the size of the library, as if these things really matter. You can increase expenditures by charging more money and then spending more money. Library size doesn't matter. Employment does matter in my view. And bar passage does matter in my view, but in part, bar passage matters because you got to pass the bar in order to practice. I was talking with an attorney earlier today, and he raised the question, well, is the bar actually the most important thing? Do we even need a bar exam? Does that really relate to what lawyers actually do? Maybe there's things like people skills. Maybe there's things like the ability to generate business. I mean, research, you can have your paralegal research things. You can look things up. How much do you actually have to memorize?
You don't have to memorize any. I mean, how many lawyers are walking around with, all of criminal law and all of torts just in their head? No one's doing that. Everyone is looking things up. And when you really think also to the history of the bar exam, because back when they had, bar privilege, they really had this bar exam to keep people out. Though it was designed purposefully to keep minorities out of the legal profession. Like, that is the history of the bar exam. And when I'm looking at things like people taking online bar exams, all of the craziness, having to sign waivers to take the bar exam in COVID, you really have to step back and be like, what are we doing here? Like, why? Why is this happening? Why don't we have any other mechanism for having students, who have successfully graduated law school start their legal profession without risking their lives to take the bar exam in an unsafe condition, or taking some sort of haphazard situation online that we're not even sure has been properly vetted?
Yeah, no, it's a huge problem. And these exams have been around for a while, but nobody's really questioning their importance or their relevance. And I mean, we need the ABA to change some things. Who knows whether they would, but it's also on the consumer end as well, what we value and what we place importance on. I know we've both been in touch with Kyle McKinty over at Law School Transparency. I know you've been working with him pretty closely, and he's trying to change the conversation. And could you share a little more, I could talk about it, but you might know more than me, Law School Transparency and what they're up to?
So they're actually up to some fantastic things. I'm really excited about it. There's some new things coming in the pipeworks probably next month. This is August, so definitely next month. So one of the things that he's really trying to do is give students access to data that matters, to the employment data, to the the bar passage data, to what percentage, not even like are they employed, but what percentage is going to big firm, what percentage is going to federal clerkships, state clerkships, and then looking also at the rates a little bit further down. So he's got a couple of things. He has his data dashboard, which is so great. You can also see, just some demographic data of the schools, but you can also, what I really like is put in your own financial information and then put in how much money you feel comfortable taking out in loans and in debt, and kind of build your law school list that way based on debt profile and historic scholarships and how a person like you might stack up with some of those scholarships, which is really powerful information. But then what he's also launching is he's launching a PreLaw advisor, independent consultant training platform that's going to be just fantastic. It's going to make sure that PreLaw advisors and consultants are trained on the ethical ways to help students to look past the rankings and to make those better informed decisions. I think there's going to be an opportunity for pre-law students themselves to really learn about, okay, what is the diversity statement? What is this? So that maybe they don't have someone that they feel like is in their corner that can tell them that information, or they don't have a lawyer in their family. They can go and get some of this information. And there'll also be a way for pre-law advisors and independent consultants to sort of track their students through the application process so that they can make sure that every piece is being taken care of and things aren't falling through the cracks. It's going to give pre-law advisors so much more power and confidence in their advising. Hopefully at some point, not in September, but in some point, we're looking to have a mentor matching system so that we can match these pre-law students up with lawyers in the field and with, just people that can help them on their path. What I love is that all of the data is going to be free for students. They will have access right now, the LST wizard, that pro wizard. It has just like so much opportunity for you to customize it for yourself, and to give that into the hands of students themselves is going to be so phenomenal. I'm really excited for that.
That's awesome. I really love the idea of training pre-law advisors. I think pre-law advisors, their hearts are often, they're in the right place. They don't get into this profession because they don't care about students. They do, but their information is often outdated, or they're just going based on whatever they think their common sense is, not actually what the policies are or what best serves students, especially with so many policy changes in recent years with the LSAT and the admissions process. There are people who still think law schools average multiple scores. There are still people who tell students, take the LSAT officially just to see how you'll do, all of which is terrible advice. And then with the digital LSAT, and now the flex and the retake limits, first there were, then there weren't, then there are again. It's back and forth all the time. And I mean, I'm tracking this on a daily basis, even like hour by hour sometimes.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to keep up. It's a full-time job just to keep up with that. And that's my job. Pre-law advisors also have to advise students on what classes to take and such. So I wouldn't expect them to do everything.
Have other duties.
Yeah, it's like a part-time thing.
PreLaw advisors.
Yeah, it's just a part-time thing for them, given other responsibilities. Maybe it's a part-time position in general sometimes as well. These universities aren't always funding them sufficiently, even though they should. So, I mean, they'll call on folks like you and I to step in and kind of fill in those gaps. But then if we're only showing up a couple times a semester at most, maybe the rest of the time they're really getting substandard information, which is unfortunate. So I'm glad that LST is going to give them like proper training comprehensively, and I assume it'll be kept up to date as well, I'm sure.
It will be. And the other thing I almost forgot that is so exciting is that there's going to be the legal compass that's going to be available, especially for consultants and PreLaw advisors if they opt into it. And what that legal compass is, honestly, something I could have used. It's kind of like a personality assessment, but for the legal workplace. So you take, a series of questions, and it'll help you figure out what kind of law you want to go into, but also what kind of workplace you want to go into. Do you want to be micromanaged? Do you like to have a supervisor? Do you like to work independently on your own cases? Do you like working in teams? Just the environment of your workplace and how that will mesh with how you are most productive is such great information, because honestly, most people have no idea before they do on-campus recruitment or anything what big law is like or what they even are looking for in a job. And then they kind of get swept along this pipeline if they are so fortunate to go to big law. And then they get there and they're like, oh, wow, none of this actually gels with what I want to do. I have no idea what a small firm is like, but now I'm going to just go and see. That's kind of the wrong attitude to do it. I feel like there's going to be so much more opportunity for students to make informed decisions, law school students to make informed decisions, and even college students, right? To make these informed decisions about their career path and where they're looking to go.
This all sounds incredible. My question is just, why isn't LSAC doing all of this? I feel like LST is filling in the gap of what LSAC should be doing.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that kind of goes to your comment about what their priorities are. I mean, you don't really see in any other sphere, I feel like, the holder of the application also being the maker of the test. I think there's just so much conflict there. And they have their hands on a lot of things that I think that this is unfortunately something that's kind of fallen a little bit by the wayside. I think if there were a separate organization that was focused on just the test, and a separate organization that was focused on the applications, then we might see a little bit more of this.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think that's absolutely right. There is a conflict of interest there. I mean, I know that you're aware as well, like LSAC held a number of webinars at the beginning of COVID around the admission side of things, where they invited current admission officers to come in and talk about how COVID was impacting admissions. But the thing is that there's a certain agenda there. Basically, the message is everything is fine. Go to law school now, still fine to go to law school now. Don't worry, we'll take care of everything. When in reality, the situation is much more complex. It's much more nuanced. In some cases, you might want to go now. Other cases, you might want to wait. In some cases, maybe you're not that informed about what being a lawyer is actually like, and it's worth taking a step back. And they're not going to tell you that, but I feel like you and I and law school transparency are willing to be a bit more forthright, because at the end of the day, we're really invested in helping the students make the best possible decisions for themselves. If a particular individual doesn't want to go to law school, that's fine with me. There's plenty of other people I'm okay with taking, but the law schools are really, in a way, they're desperate and they're worried and they're concerned. And so the answer is yes, 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 but the tone there is questionable to me.
Right. And I know that I talked about this last time when I was on your show about how I try to really push my students on their why law. And there's so many times when I talk to students and they're so set on being a lawyer, and then tell me what they want to do and how they want to be a change agent. And I just have to continue to remind them, being a lawyer is fantastic and you can do so much with a JD, but it is not your only method of being a change agent. Sometimes I'm listening to them, I'm like, maybe you really want to get a master's in education. Maybe you really want to, did you even know there were masters of urban planning? There's so many paths sometimes to doing the kind of work that you want to do that people haven't even thought of.
Yeah, and that comes in on the LSAT side as well. Sometimes students will be struggling with motivation, and I'll ask them, well, why do you want to go to law school? Can you keep that first and foremost in your mind, to keep the goal in mind? Not only what law school do you want to go to, if you want to put Harvard Law on your phone background or something, but even beyond that, why do you actually want to be an attorney? What do you want to do? And if you don't know the answer to that, and it's more just a vague dream, or if it's for lack of a better option, then it's a lot harder to stay motivated too. So I think knowing your why and having that goal in mind is important for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, and this is the thing that, again, I wish I had done. I have no regrets, but it would have been really helpful. I say, okay, think of the area that you want to change. And sometimes they can like really articulate, like, I want to change this particular area. Cool. Who are the people that are changing that? Like, go find the job, the organization, the person that is doing what you want to do. Are they a lawyer? If they are a lawyer, what was their path? If they're not a lawyer, investigate that a little bit, because sometimes I think putting a person or a job or an organization in your mind when you have this idea of what you want to do, seeing what it actually looks like in the real world, and then seeing if that is actually something that you want to do, talking to that person, even emailing them and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about your career path or your day-to-day job, and then taking that information and being like, oh, well, I thought it was this, but it's really this, and maybe you like this better, but maybe you don't. And those are the conversations that I want students to be having before they, make this 3-year investment.
And that's something I think should be more in the career pipeline all along the spectrum there, from high school to college, to the application process, to being in law school, to becoming an attorney. As you were mentioning other countries, I know that other countries are very big on the apprenticeship model. Mm-hmm. And that's a core portion of it, where I think at least one of those years of law school is replaced with actually apprenticing and learning on the job, learning the practical skills that lawyers actually do, which is great. I think learning by doing is underutilized in the American system and much better used elsewhere. But also I think
learning by doing, it's the unpaid internships that only a certain population can afford to do. I had to get a job every summer. I had no time for unpaid internships.
No. Unacceptable to me as well. I was like, I will apply to as many internships as it takes to find the one that will pay me for my time. But I think that apprenticeship works to learn by doing, but then you're actually learning what it's like a little bit too late. And maybe you don't like what you'd be doing, and better to learn that sooner rather than later. So if there were a way to establish it where it was valued by law schools to put on your application, I've worked as a paralegal, or I shadowed for a week or a month, and there were formal programs established to make that easier to do, or at least the templates to set that up for yourself were ready-made. So that you could, so people would actually do it, because we could tell people to do it, and some will, some won't. The highly motivated will, but giving people the exact tools and tips and scripts to go out there and make it happen, I think would be enormously useful.
Right. And I'm not saying everyone has to do a pre-law or, a legal internship. People ask me all the time, do I have to do this before I go to law school? I don't think you have to. I just think you need to be sure. And sometimes you can be sure without doing that, but you need to be sure. You need to be confident. That doesn't mean you're not going to change your mind, because of course you're going to get to law school and you're going to be exposed to so many different things that you didn't even know existed. So it's natural to change your mind. But I do think maybe different from college, where it's fine to go in undecided and you have this first year exploratory program. You don't really, you only have 3 years in law school. There's no first year exploratory program. And I think you need to be a little bit more sure because of the investment that you're making.
It's a big investment. It's a big investment. When I think about things I'd want to change in the process, and I mean, I know you know a lot about this as well, if not more than I do, but like the idea of like all the lack of transparency around scholarships, the fact that most people don't pay sticker. And if you do, you're essentially subsidizing those who got the scholarships. And the conditional scholarships and all of that, it's such a black box.
And the fact that people don't understand all the different ways that schools can give aid on the front end, on the back end, that they're not always the same, especially when you look at the T14 or the T10 or T5, like you're not really going to get a bunch of front end scholarships. You're going to get some need-based aid if you qualify, but you're not going to get a lot of front end scholarships, but they differ in terms of the amount of back end aid that they give. And a lot of people don't understand that.
It's mysterious, and they don't tell people enough about it. The schools obviously don't have incentive to, and this is part of the problem, where they're saying, come attend our school. But then they're not really telling you what offers are available or what you could do. And they're not even emphasizing the importance of the LSAT enough, because they want to give that nice, warm and cheery feeling of being holistic. When in reality, if they told you, we will take you right now and let you pay sticker, but if you retake the LSAT and do 5 points better, we could give you half off. Like, wouldn't you like to know that? And wouldn't that be worth waiting a year for, to save over $100,000?
Absolutely. But people can't make those decisions if they don't know, or if it's just, I've heard, maybe it's a risk. What if it doesn't happen? I started talking at the beginning about other countries and what they do. And I don't think it's a perfect system, because it still has its issues. But, the Canadian law school system, they actually have some different application, I don't know how to call it, like categories. if you will. Like if you are an Aboriginal or if you are an underrepresented minority, you can apply within certain kind of designations, and you still have to be a competitive applicant, but within those processes, they will look more at some of your soft skills, at your essays, at your letters of rec, because, you know, you're saying I've had this hardship that has impacted my ability to, you know, do certain things, or these financial hardships. And I think that is a step at least in the right direction. It's like a different applicant pool almost.
Oh, interesting. It's a whole separate program practically.
Yeah, it's like you apply, it's like, I like on the college side how you would apply early action versus regular, and you know everyone's still sort of the same standard, but they're different kind of pools. It's sort of like that. They've got, I mean, the timing is roughly similar, but you have, you know, these underrepresented or these Aboriginal pools, and then a general kind of applicant pool, and you pick one, you pick where you apply, and I think there's slightly different focus when they're looking at your application based on which pool you apply to. Now, again, it's still very competitive. Like it's just a first step, but it's at least a nod in the direction that we understand that people from these different, you know, subsets may have or have historically had difficulties entering the legal field. Now, Canada only has like 24 law schools. So, you know, it's a much different system. But I do think that it's making the right nod, more than just a diversity statement, which I love. I think everyone should write a diversity statement, even if you're like, I'm a straight white male. I think that you have something diverse and unique in your background. But I think it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more of an acknowledgement of the hardships that you may have had to face.
And I think that, as you said, 24 law schools, there's not a rankings focus there. So they're not so numbers driven. They don't even have to care as much, which gives them a certain freedom to emphasize the things they want to emphasize, to give that nod, which I think the US schools don't really feel comfortable doing to the same extent.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think the thing that, you know, we were talking about COVID, one of the things that makes me so frustrated with both with the bar and with LSAT-Flex and COVID is that there's no acknowledgement really of the fact that African Americans, Blacks, are disproportionately affected by COVID, right? We're disproportionately more likely to have people who have to work full time to support their family, or just have health reasons or health reasons in their family that they don't feel comfortable sitting for the bar exam, that they don't feel comfortable just like navigating certain things, or going, you know, full time, like for those law schools that are starting in person or doing a hybrid model, they're not really thinking about, well, who disproportionately can't take advantage of that. And I just think that's kind of wrong. Not kind of, it's very wrong.
And here's the thing, LSAC, you know, they do this flex rollout, and then you can't reach them if there's a problem. They're saying that they lost 140 scores from the July LSAT Flex due to some sort of tech issue, some sort of tech glitch, and there's no transparency, no communication, period. They called the people who were affected, but if you were an overseas test taker, you didn't hear from them. They didn't put anything in writing. They didn't send emails. They didn't make a public statement, nothing on social media. It's like they didn't want the word to get out, but obviously with social media, word gets out.
Of course, of course.
Now imagine if this was like your last shot.
Yeah.
And you heard nothing from them. Then there's this other thing I just heard about recently, which is that some people's scores are like 30 to 40 or even 50 points lower than they should have been. Like one or two sections just weren't counted, period. Like it was you submitted 0 for those.
I mean, that's crazy.
Try to reach them and get that resolved. Good luck. The person on the other end of the phone doesn't know anything about it.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, but we're going to continue to pretend like business as usual for the application cycle. And I think I think we need a major cultural shift in this country. I do. Because when you ask most people, I think everyone would agree that there are issues with testing. Everyone. And yet, we're not actually doing anything about it. Everyone understands the system is broken, and we're just going to continue to let the system be broken. I mean, there's so many things that can be done, even on a corporate side. And this is kind of bold because I know it's not in their financial interest, but maybe there should be differential pricing for underrepresented students. Not everyone can pay $11.50 for an LSAT course, you know? Maybe there should be just more resources given to high school students, to college students, more partnerships. I mean, a lot of these corporations, a lot of these big test prep companies, or just admissions companies, I think they could be doing a lot more to reach more applicants, potential applicants earlier in the game, just a wider net. It's not enough to do a couple pro bono test prep students. It's not enough to do a couple pro bono admissions students. I think it needs to be a lot wider, a lot wider, a lot more impact.
Yeah. And so, I mean, when you see folks getting shut down for putting out free information on YouTube, that's a huge problem to me, because LSAC, as we said, they have a conflict of interest. They're never really going to put out the best prep possible. They'll put out something minimal as lip service, as a token. And then to say other people can't do it is unacceptable to me. And that sends exactly the wrong message, totally contrary to their mission statement about increasing access and improving diversity. It's just not there. The actions and the words are totally disconnected. And so,
we haven't seen any data that proves that actual diversity has been increasing. It hasn't been. No.
And so if diversity is not increasing and they claim they want to do that, why would they remove free resources? I mean, back when I started teaching the LSAT, the in-person prep classes that were the default at the time were like $1,500. And since then, the price has come down. Being able to offer online classes has been awesome. I've really enjoyed doing that. It has brought the price down a lot. I also, as you know, I put out more free stuff on YouTube than pretty much anybody else. And so when I see it getting shut down, it really makes me sad. And it also has this chilling effect where people aren't going to even want to create the free resources because they're going to be afraid, if I create it now, will it get shut down tomorrow? Will I get a takedown letter? Will I get sued? Those are questions that I'm sure a lot of people are asking because everybody's taking notice of this. What LSAC is doing on their end, I mean, they have fee waivers, which is nice. It's based on the last year's tax returns, but you're talking about COVID. Your 2019 taxes don't reflect how you got hit in 2020 from COVID.
Not at all.
Your 2018 taxes don't either. And there's like a lag on their end, you know? And then what they're actually giving you with the fee waiver is not nearly enough. They're giving you one free LSAT administration, one, but people retake, and it's in your interest to retake. But shelling out $200 if you're below the poverty line to retake the LSAT, it's a tough decision for people, but it should not be, because that would give you access to tens of thousands of dollars in scholarship money.
Right. Or the score preview, I think, should just be free for everyone.
Yes. So the score preview, I mean, that's like an easy money grab on their part. I mean, people can pay $45 before the test or $75 after. And so if you don't pay before, then you get anxious about your results. You have to shell out more, or you just let that score be on your record, which isn't a big deal because they take the highest, but psychologically for the test taker, that's a huge problem.
No, I completely agree. It's just, there needs to be more. There needs to just be more done to de-emphasize the financial gain that I think a lot of these companies and LSAC even are getting from underrepresented minorities, students, low socioeconomic status, who are just trying to gain access into this. The legal profession is not, I mean, look, I love being a lawyer, but I don't think you have to be a genius to be a lawyer. You know, like, I don't think that there needs to be this high barrier of entry where people feel like, oh, well, maybe I'm not smart enough to be a lawyer. I hear that from some high school students, right? You're 17 and you've already decided that you're not smart enough to be a lawyer. I mean, that's crazy. Because they're like, well, I don't test well, or you have to get the mentality, you have to get straight A's to go to law school. Lawyers just read well. They just read well, and these are taught skills, and they learn how to write well. But I think if you apply yourself and you learn those skills, you too can be a great lawyer. And to be honest, I know that I have seen some terrible lawyers. I've seen some terrible, I'm like, how did you pass the bar? You're such a bad lawyer. And yet we have hardworking, determined students who feel like they can't enter this profession because of all the barriers. And that just makes me angry.
Yeah, and here's the problem. I mean, as we said, the bar exam, right? So is the bar exam reflecting what you would do as a lawyer, what makes a good lawyer? If it doesn't, you got to change the bar exam. If you change the bar exam, then you should change law school as well. Right. Now, the reason the LSAT is considered valid and reliable is that it represents how you could do in first year law school grades. There's some correlation there. It doesn't represent entirely, of course. So if you change law school and you change the bar exam, then maybe you could change the LSAT a little bit as well. Now, I happen to think the LSAT's a great exam, but maybe it should get a little bit less weighting in the admission process overall than it does. I certainly think it should get less weighting, yet I still think it's a great exam. So those things may seem contradictory. I don't necessarily see them that way, but no question to me that law school and the bar exam do need to change. And law schools are slowly becoming aware of that as they see that a lot of their grads graduate not knowing how to be a lawyer. And law firms certainly notice that too.
I didn't know anything about being a lawyer. And for me, I felt like the bar exam was just testing. Well, first off, it was testing my typing speed. I type real fast, which is such an advantage and a silly advantage because no one really talks about this. But, in all of the essay questions, the more that you can type, generally speaking, the better your answers. If you type really slowly, you're not going to be able to get as much information. And that is actually such a huge, that's a huge deal. That really affects your score on something so arbitrary. And then you're memorizing all the stuff that honestly, I cannot tell you anything that I learned on the bar exam. I'm a family law attorney. I know family law. I learned a few things on the bar exam, but most of it I memorized, I took the test, and I don't. Because you can't keep all of that knowledge in your head forever.
No. And so, you're seeing it right there. You're seeing it right there that much of what you did in law school ended up not even mattering for you.
Yeah. Law school was a lot more, because I could take courses that were in the type of law that I wanted to do, was a lot more valuable than the bar exam. The bar exam to me was just how much money can you spend on bar prep? And do you also have the luxury of going 3 months without working? Because that's a huge deal. Because they say you have to study 8 hours a day, which obviously means you can't be working 8 hours a day. There's so much privilege wrapped up into even your ability to bar prep.
And that's part of why if you removed the bar exam or changed a bit and focused more on apprenticeship as a model, then you could work while you were learning by doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then the notion that if I move, I have to take the bar exam again. Why? I haven't become a worse lawyer.
Well, I think that probably comes from the fact that different states have different laws, right?
They do. But then you see things like the UBE, right? So if we can roll out things like the UBE and say, okay, a certain score will get you into a certain state or whatever, then you really do have to question the validity of that. Oh, well, you need to take a whole different exam completely. But if you're going to move states, some states after a certain number of years let you take an attorney exam. But if I were to take the bar exam like I did in 2018 and then need to move across the country in 2019, well, I would have just had to take the whole bar again.
I would see maybe there's should be a uniform federal one and then a state supplement that you do later, but it's much smaller. That seems more reasonable to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what else haven't we hit?
Let's see. We've talked about testing, I think, and we've talked about just the need for prep in high school and college. I think that there needs to be more overall emphasis on writing and reading skills in college, because honestly, most Americans can't write or read very well. And if we had those writing and reading skills embedded in college, then it wouldn't matter what you majored in. It wouldn't matter where you went. You would still have the skills necessary to go to law school. I think that's important. That's one thing that I would just plug in general. I don't know. I think just the knowledge of networking is also really important. We don't teach students how to network. We don't teach them how to build their own community. We don't teach them how to make those mentorship connections in which they can sort of see the different professions that they can use. I think that we need to bring the interviews back a little bit. I would love to bring interviews back because some people are so expressive in person. And yes, we would want everyone to be expressive in their personal statement and their diversity statement. But the law school application is so bare bones when you really think about it. It's not a lot of information that I think we're really doing a disservice, especially to underrepresented students, by not allowing them to have an interview and not allowing them to get to explain maybe some of their circumstances in real time.
That is I love that last point about the interviews in particular. I think that that's so important. And that relates a lot to what you do as an attorney. You do have to talk to people, especially if you want to be generating business. Yeah. And as I think law firms get smaller and more folks are sole proprietors, so solo practitioners, I think that those people skills, it's worth evaluating them. And obviously you don't need to have a public facing position, but that would be useful information to add into the mix.
Yeah. I think that there's just so many applicants that shine in an interview that it's really important to bring back. And the number of schools that don't interview is I mean, most of them don't.
Most of them don't. Yeah.
So, I mean, except when you get to things like, you look at NYU's public interest scholarship, like that. Those are great scholarship programs. However, and there's so many students that come to me, they're like, I'm really passionate about public interest. I really want to go to NYU. I really want to apply to some of these public interest scholarships. The fact of the matter is they don't take most students straight through. And the type of experience that you need to get that public interest scholarship is not necessarily something that you have just naturally done, especially if you're a first generation college student. Like, you just wouldn't know necessarily the things that would make you competitive for that type of scholarship. And then of course you still have to be super competitive for NYU. So when I look at some of these schools that have these really great public interest scholarships, it still seems to be going to students who are otherwise wealthy.
Yeah, no, that's unfortunate that they would have so many strict criteria for something like that. Because as you said, it's a privilege to have even the time to devote to that sort of thing. In the first place. I actually did a public interest scholarship for LSAT prep a few months back, and I kept it super simple. I was like, just submit a video. That's it. It could be on your phone. I don't care if it's shaky. I don't care if the video quality is not high quality from a resolution perspective. I just want to get a sense of your personality. And that was it. No other criteria. Really letting the humanness come through. And I think that's really missing in a process that's so numbers driven and so bureaucratic with so much red tape.
When the scholarship applications are harder in some instances than the law school application, you're not increasing access, because the same barriers to having that strong law school application are going to be the same barriers to having those scholarships.
Exactly. Well, I think we've hit it. And I know that you've got something, breaking barriers. You want to share more on that as a wrap up?
I do. So I've got these two things that are launching. The first, I'm so excited. As I mentioned, I think that companies need to do more to reach students, and not just low-income students, but also lower middle, which is where I grew up. So I have this program called Breaking Barriers, or Becoming a Barrier Breaker with Me, right? So it's targeted towards first-generation minority law school applicants. It is a community that is going to empower you and support you. It starts at $50 a month. And so at $50 a month, you would get 4 hours of recorded video from me, answering questions, doing some law school application work, really just getting quality consulting advice. And then you would also get a community where you can post your answers. So for me, the reason I want to do that is because let's say you only have $200 in total to put towards law school consulting your admissions. You can do 4 months, $50 a month. And you can get a whole bunch of advice, and you can get your law school application done. There are other tiers if you want to have more of the live sessions or the live Q&A, but it's capped at $150 a month. So it goes from $50 a month to $150 a month. So even at the highest level, I've tried to make it really affordable. And then the other thing that I'm really excited about is starting August 15th. I am having a boot camp. It's running August 15th through November 15th. It is 13 weeks. It's going to be a transformative 13 weeks. Spaces are limited. It's limited to about... it's limited to a number that I feel like I'm going to be able to give individual attention to. And we're going to go through the entire application process. It includes 10 hours of small group discussions. It includes 2 hours of private consulting with me. It includes written feedback on your personal statement and your draft. We're going to talk about your letters of recommendation, your addenda, your resume, your interview, all that stuff so that you're ready to hit submit in November. And I've brought the price down for that a little bit too. So it's lower than my one-on-one consulting. And I have payment plans available for that as well. You can do 4 payments. That way it kind of fits in your budget a little bit more, because I really do want to increase access. I'm hoping with the barrier breakers, there's no limit. I join with your friends, join with your whole, community, but I just want to have a place where people who don't feel like they have the ability to spend a lot of money on consulting can still get quality advice, and that consulting is not just for the wealthy.
That's fantastic, Sydney. Well, I'll definitely link this below the video on my end and encourage folks to check it out. And as for what I'm up to, I'll just continue releasing more free stuff on the YouTube channel and podcast over at LSAT Unplugged. Thank you. I appreciate the referral. Yeah, so on LSAT Unplugged, the YouTube channel, the podcast, I've got tons of free resources on everything LSAT prep, including all the latest LSAT-flex updates. I've got an LSAT-flex FAQ, an LSAT-flex playlist, as well as an easy LSAT cheat sheet. So folks can definitely start there. I've got everything linked in the description below.
Thank you so much, Steve. I really hope that we can continue the conversation. If people have ideas, they can definitely reach out. And I'm hoping that we can make change.
Definitely, Sydney. Well, I appreciate the conversation. Let's keep it going.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.